Hey gamers, I am the Bad Luck Gamer, and today I'm going to be talking about casting enemies for your plot as the GM, because GM tips, yay GM tips. So casting the enemies, as in determining what kind of enemies show up in your campaign, is really important because it will help determine the atmosphere of the campaign and determine how your players will interact thereon. So, first and foremost, you need to come up with a general theme for your story so that the casting makes sense. Obviously, if you're going to go for Dawn of the Dead kind of deal and then you have Snake Men, it contradicts it. Well, it doesn't contradict itself. It disrupts the kind of flow you're going for and throws the players way off. So you want to keep your enemies kind of in a similar line of thought. You know, occultists, demons, yeah, zombies, aberrations, survivors, determine the kind of theme. Also, determine who the inevitable bad guy is that the group is going to end up facing. Obviously, it's someone who's either going to be a complete and utter badass themselves or control of something completely and utterly badass. Going with the theme and your bad guy, and you don't need to determine who the actual bad guy is, but you want to get a theme of who the bad guy will be. So, for instance, a crime syndicate lord, who has control over vast amounts of money and assassins, or a powerful wizard with unimaginable magical power, or maybe a demon who has control over vast hordes of the demonic and undead. I don't know. So determine that, then determine the theme, and then determine how the game is going to go. Also determine on what your enemy quantity is going to be for the game. For instance, if there's going to be less combat, make each combat more interesting for the players. They don't have to be necessarily more difficult. In fact, if there's less combat with very difficult fights in between, that can be kind of abrupt for the players. So sometimes you need to have like the players are sneaking and then all of a sudden a horde of zombies. They're all zombies that they can easily kill, but because it's a horde, they can't necessarily kill them quick enough. Or, for instance, some minor thugs that'll give the player some information, and you don't want the players dying to minor thugs to get there are a plot point. So, gauge the power level, but also gauge the quantity of enemies. If it's a majority combat campaign, then you at least want like 50% combat, 50% story, or something along those lines. If you want more than 50% combat, go for it, I guess. But more than 50% combat takes up a lot of time in a game. And honestly, to me, the best is story, fight, story. Because then you get 2/3 story, 1/3 fighting. And it keeps things kind of going at an easy pace. Or not an easy pace, but it keeps things going at an interesting pace for the characters. But then again, I'm a very story-based storyteller, so when picking enemies to go against, also make it clear to the players what the type of enemies they're going to be facing are for a certain section of the game, because then the players can feel good about preparing for the next fight. And you're not going to throw something completely way out of the way that they're going to be like, oh man, I got all this undead stuff when I leveled up and I was super ready, and now we're fighting Snake Men. I mean, come on, GM. What are you doing? So please try to keep it along the same theme. Now, Snake Men isn't. It's just the weird one. Snake Men obviously go with other themes. They go with desert themes. They go with beast people themes. So, Egyptian themes. Don't worry about using Snake Men. Just don't throw Snake Men in like the middle of a zombie campaign, because then that's confusing as heck. But anyway, and then have the fights progress until whatever your end result is going to be. So if the end result is you corner the kingpin, whatever it is, have the majority of the fights be people with information or people near people with information, or something so that when the players finally approach the kingpin, they have the idea of what the story was, they have an idea of what his assets were, and they either overcame them or circumvented them, something. Anyway, and make the players feel good. If it's a giant boss battle, or the giant demonic demon several stories tall, then have the fights be a progression where each fight is slightly harder but gives a lot more experience so that when the players get to that final fight, they're super strong, power level your characters. The types of enemies will determine the pace of leveling in your campaign, so it's really important. And also, something to keep in mind is on top of the story, don't be afraid to put in rival characters that either compete against or conflict with the party so that the players can actually have kind of NPCs that are their level, that it's a competition and they feel like, well, I'm going against other heroes, and that's really exciting. Those kind of fights are the most exciting, and especially in some of my games, people have really enjoyed those fights more than standard monster fights because it feels more like they competed against another person. Also, as a GM, when playing your creatures, make sure you're marking that their intelligence is a little bit lower than it probably should be. Like, if it's a bunch of people, thugs, don't make them as smart as you are as the GM, because more than likely you're going to be able to outmaneuver your own party. Make them kind of stupid. It doesn't. It makes it so that the players aren't like constantly in this battle of wits against a super intelligent opponent, especially when they're like low class thugs. So don't be afraid to play up the scene with the creatures and don't necessarily make the smartest move to make the players in danger. In fact, do some moves that put the enemies in danger that the players can capitalize on them. The players will have a slightly easier time, which they might or might not like, but they'll also feel good for taking up those opportunities when fighting the enemies. So you want to kind of poke holes in the right places of your enemies so that when the players hit it, it gives them something that makes them feel good about it, and it makes them feel like they took up an opportunity, when it just came. So you want players to feel good about combat. And I know combat lasts an exceedingly long time, so you always want to make sure that there is an kind of an expeditious way to finish a fight if the players do it really well. Or if the fight is intentionally long, give players something else to do in the combat. If you're in the final boss battle, give the players minor objectives to do during the minor big boss battle. For instance, Big Boss regenerates health all the time because of crystals he has around the base. I know that's super cliche, but that gives players something outside of the combat that makes it kind of more interesting than we beat the crap out of the enemy over and over and over with my giant sword. All right. So I think that about covers it. So just a recap. Keep to a general theme of how you want your campaign to go. Don't go out beyond more than 4 types of different enemies, because then it might be confusing, at least for a particular section or scene. Just try to keep the enemies within a certain line of thought. Don't give the players left field and right field at the same time. Make sure that you have an idea of who your final boss is and ready the players for the final boss with the enemies. Mine just went blank. Oh yeah. Play the enemies in a slightly less intelligent fashion so that the players can feel superior and better about themselves. Give the characters equal level antagonists that you can use more of your wits against them to make the players feel more of the pressure. Make those very slim. Don't do it too often. Maybe like twice per story or 3 times maybe. And for the final boss, make it so it's either the players can beat him if they were super prepared, or that they have something else to do during the final boss fight, so that it's not just a game of survive whacking the pinata. It's not that fun. Anyway, gamers, ciao for now. Good luck with your campaigns and your various enemies, and I'll see you in the next episode.